The airport was alive with the usual morning rush, filled with travelers clutching tickets, dragging suitcases, and scanning screens with hurried eyes. Amid the chaos, one young woman stood quietly in line, her composure steady but her heart heavy. She was dressed in a cream blazer and navy jeans, her hair neatly tied back, her posture calm yet commanding. Her name was Maya Johnson, and this morning was supposed to be just another ordinary flight, another business trip. But what happened in that terminal would change not only her life, but also the perception of everyone who witnessed it. For in that moment, when her dignity was challenged in the most cruel and humiliating way, Maya would rise with a truth so powerful that no one could have imagined. Before we move deeper into her journey, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in standing up for dignity no matter who you are or where you come from, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales. Your support allows these stories of hope and resilience to reach more hearts around the world. Maya had been traveling her whole life. Airports were familiar ground for her. She was no ordinary passenger. She was a woman who had worked harder than most could imagine, climbing through endless layers of doubt and bias to build a reputation in aviation that commanded respect. But to those standing in line behind her, she looked like any other young professional, quietly minding her business, patiently waiting for her turn. When she finally reached the counter, however, the mood shifted in an instant. The gate agent, a blonde woman with a sharp uniform and an even sharper attitude, barely glanced at Maya before narrowing her eyes. There was a stiffness in her posture, a smug superiority in her voice as she barked for Maya's passport. Maya handed it over politely, her expression calm, her tone respectful. But the agent smirked, holding the passport in her hand as though it were tainted. She flipped it open with exaggerated disdain, glanced briefly, and then said words loud enough for others in line to hear, words dripping with venom and arrogance. "This can't be real. People like you don't belong in first class." A gasp echoed from a few passengers nearby. Maya's chest tightened, but she remained composed, refusing to let the cruelty seep into her bones. She had faced worse in her life, fought harder battles, and she knew that giving this woman the reaction she wanted would only fuel her prejudice. She politely asked the agent to process her boarding pass. Instead, the woman sneered and, in an act so outrageous it sent the entire terminal into stunned silence, the gate agent struck a match and lit the corner of Maya's passport on fire. The small flame spread quickly, consuming the edge of the blue booklet as the woman held it up triumphantly, like some twisted display of power. "Get out of here," she yelled, her voice echoing across the hall. "You don't belong on this flight, and you never will." Maya froze, the sting of humiliation crashing over her like a wave. Cameras rose instantly as bystanders pulled out phones to capture the shocking moment. Some gasped, some whispered, some even laughed nervously as they tried to process what they were seeing. The security guard at the counter moved closer, his hand gripping Maya's arm gently but firmly, as though preparing to escort her away. For a moment, it seemed as if her dignity, her years of sacrifice, her hard-earned respect, would all be reduced to ashes alongside her burning passport. But what no one knew, what not even the arrogant gate agent could have imagined, was that Maya was no ordinary traveler. She was the Chief Inspector of the Federal Aviation Administration, one of the highest-ranking officials in the entire aviation industry. The woman they mocked, humiliated, and tried to cast aside held the power to ground entire airlines, to shut down airports, and to strip that very agent of her job in seconds. And as the last flicker of flame died out on her passport, Maya's eyes lifted, calm and unshaken. She was not broken. She was rising. Her mind flickered back to her childhood, to the endless days of poverty and struggle, to the nights her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Maya had grown up knowing what it meant to be overlooked, underestimated, and doubted at every turn. Her teachers told her she aimed too high when she dreamed of airplanes and engineering. Employers told her she didn't fit their image. Society whispered that she was too young, too black, too female to rise in an industry dominated by men in suits. But Maya fought anyway. She studied harder than anyone around her, took on internships no one else wanted, stayed late nights in labs where she was the only face of color in the room. Step by step she climbed. And now, standing in that airport, watching her passport reduced to ash, she realized this was no different from every other barrier she had faced. They wanted her silent. They wanted her small. But she would not bow. The passengers around her began to murmur louder, phones raised high as they recorded every second of the humiliation. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others demanded the agent stop, while a few looked at Maya with pity. But Maya did not want pity. She wanted justice, and she knew she carried the authority to demand it. Slowly, she turned her gaze toward the security officer gripping her arm, her voice calm but firm as she told him to release her. Something in her tone made him pause, confused but compelled to obey. She straightened her blazer, her presence suddenly larger, heavier, commanding the space around her. The gate agent, still smirking, clearly believed she had won. "You can call whoever you want," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance, "but no one's going to save you here. Not today." The words stung like poison, but they also revealed the depth of the woman's ignorance. She didn't know. None of them knew. And Maya, instead of lashing out in anger, chose to let the truth reveal itself like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek black folder embossed with the golden insignia of the Federal Aviation Administration. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. The security guard's grip on her arm loosened entirely as he recognized the seal. Maya laid the folder on the counter with deliberate calm, her every movement controlled, graceful, unbothered by the chaos erupting around her. She flipped it open, revealing her credentials. The crowd gasped. The cameras zoomed in, and the gate agent's face paled as the words on the ID came into focus. Chief FAA Inspector. In that single moment, the balance of power shifted completely. The woman who had humiliated her, who had mocked her existence, who had tried to erase her dignity with flames, suddenly stood trembling before the authority of the very system she thought she controlled. Maya did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to retaliate with venom. Her very presence, her truth, spoke louder than any insult. She was not the victim they thought she was. She was the judge, the overseer, the enforcer of justice in the skies. The passengers erupted in applause, some even cheering, as Maya calmly retrieved what remained of her passport. The cameras continued rolling, capturing not just the humiliation but the breathtaking reveal of her true identity. For those watching, it was more than just a dramatic moment. It was a lesson in resilience, in patience, and in the quiet strength of dignity. But this was only the beginning. For as Maya stood there, the airport trembling with shock, she knew this moment was bigger than her. This was not just about one woman being mistreated. It was about every person who had ever been underestimated, mocked, or cast aside because of the way they looked, where they came from, or what others believed they could achieve. Maya was ready to carry that weight. She was ready to turn this humiliation into hope. And as the cameras flashed and the gate agent's arrogance crumbled into fear, Maya understood something powerful. Sometimes the greatest victories are not won with anger, but with truth revealed in the right moment. The silence that followed the reveal was heavier than the chaos that came before it. The gate agent, whose smugness had once filled the terminal, now stood paralyzed, her hand trembling as she realized what she had done. The flames that had licked at Maya's passport seemed almost symbolic now, burning away arrogance and exposing truth. Passengers who had witnessed the humiliation began to step forward, voices rising, demanding accountability. Some clapped, others shouted, but most simply stared in awe at the calm young woman who had endured the worst of insults and yet stood taller than anyone in the room. Maya did not need to shout. She did not need to degrade. Her voice was steady, low, yet it carried through the terminal with an authority that could not be questioned. She instructed the security guard to document everything, her words measured and firm. She then requested the presence of the airport supervisor. No one dared to resist. Within moments, the once commanding gate agent was escorted behind the counter, her arrogance replaced with a pale mask of regret. The crowd buzzed louder as more phones went up to record, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary, an injustice unraveling before their very eyes and justice rising in its place. For Maya, however, the moment was not about revenge. She could have demanded the agent's immediate termination, and likely it would have happened on the spot. But her eyes were on something greater. She knew the humiliation she had faced was not isolated. It was the reflection of a deeper sickness, one that had dismissed and demeaned countless others without consequence. If she wanted real change, this moment had to become more than a viral clip. It had to become a symbol. Her mind drifted back to the countless young girls she had met during her career, girls who looked like her, who dreamed of aviation but didn't see themselves reflected in cockpits or control towers. She thought of the students she had mentored, their eyes wide with hope but clouded with the doubt planted by others, and she realized that what she chose to do here, in this crowded terminal, could give them a new story to hold on to. A story where resilience triumphed, where dignity shattered prejudice, and where truth silenced cruelty. She raised her eyes, looking at the crowd, not just at the faces but at the lenses of their cameras, knowing that thousands, perhaps millions, would see this footage. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of history. She spoke of respect, of dignity, of justice. She reminded everyone that titles and uniforms meant nothing without compassion. She explained, without anger, that she was not just a passenger but the chief FAA inspector, tasked with ensuring the very safety of the skies they all traveled. The gasps that followed were not just surprise, they were awe, admiration, even guilt from those who had stayed silent moments earlier. The airport supervisor arrived, flustered and visibly shaken. He bowed his head in apology, offering assurances that the gate agent would face immediate consequences. But Maya's expression remained calm, measured. She didn't want apologies whispered in corners. She wanted change declared in the open, and so, she insisted on transparency. She demanded that this incident be formally recorded, that policies be reviewed, that every staff member be retrained on dignity and equal treatment. The supervisor hesitated, but under the watchful eyes of hundreds of witnesses and countless rolling cameras, he could not refuse. As Maya stood there, surrounded by the hum of shocked voices, she felt an overwhelming mixture of pain and pride. Pain that she had once again been forced to prove her worth, pride that she had done so without losing herself. And somewhere deep within, a fire ignited, a determination to ensure that no one else would ever be made to feel so small again. Passengers began to approach her one by one, some with tears in their eyes, thanking her for standing tall, for not crumbling under the weight of humiliation. An older woman clasped her hand, whispering that she had just witnessed courage that her grandchildren needed to see. A young man admitted he had stayed silent at first out of fear, but promised he would never again. Maya accepted their words with grace, but in her heart, she knew the real victory was not in their praise, but in the message carried forward by every phone recording this moment. Hours later, when Maya finally boarded her flight, not in shame, but in undeniable triumph, the mood had shifted entirely. The passengers on board recognized her, some nodding with respect, others whispering her story as if they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. But Maya didn't crave their admiration. She sat quietly by the window, gazing at the wings of the plane, her reflection faint in the glass. She thought of her mother, who had once told her that the world would try to clip her wings, but she must never let it. Today, those words had come alive. Today she had flown without leaving the ground. When the flight took off, Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of peace. She knew the footage would spread, that the world would debate what had happened, that her name would soon be on more lips than she ever imagined. But she also knew this: her story would inspire, her strength would ripple, and her dignity would outlive the flames that tried to destroy her. And so, the girl they tried to humiliate became the woman the world would remember, not as a victim, but as a force of truth, of justice, of resilience. A woman who turned shame into strength and prejudice into power. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you, if this story touched your heart, if Maya's strength reminded you of the importance of standing for dignity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales. These stories deserve to be heard, and your support helps them travel farther than ever before. And here's a special request before we end. Drop a comment below with one word that describes what Maya's story made you feel. Whether it's hope, courage, strength, or justice, let your word add to the legacy of this moment.